Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Rocket Chiro podcast, the business and marketing podcast for chiropractors. My name's Jerry. I'm your host. I'm a former chiropractor. I help chiropractors with websites and SEO. I help new chiropractors get started, and I help stuck chiropractors get unstuck, and I host this little podcast. Today, we are going to talk about, can you be successful as a chiropractor and be insignificant at the same time? What if you're not a big deal? What if you're not famous? What if you're not a legendary chiropractor? What if you're just not known and a bit off the radar? Can you still be successful? I'm going to tell you a little bit about where this came from. I'll probably reveal some insecurities in my own life, so I apologize ahead of time for those of you who think that I am the most secure and amazing person in the world, the 3 people in the world who don't know me that think that. And we're just going to unpack this a little bit. And I think this will be helpful for chiropractors, but I'll start from where this comes from and my own story, my own kind of thought process, being a chiropractor, and even after I closed my practice. And then we'll talk about what this means. What does it mean to be significant, and what does it mean to be successful? Now, before I get into that, I do want to remind you, if you want a better chiropractic website that is new patient focused, that helps you get more new patients from the internet, then go to Rocket Chiro and check out the Rocket Chiro websites. If you're an existing website client of mine, or you are not a client of mine, and you are interested in getting more patients from Google search, from local search specifically, the Google Maps, then reach out to me. That's a service that we can help you with. If you listen to this podcast and you're just getting started as a chiropractor, or you're feeling stuck and overwhelmed, check out my Next Step program. It's a great way to go beyond the podcast, get access to me, get some more in-depth training, and just sort of lay a really good foundation for your future success so that you can go forward and have the practice that you want to have without all the stress and complication. All that can be found at rocketchiro.com. One last offer for you guys. This is completely free, no obligation. If you would like me to look at your website and SEO, give you some recommendations, show you how you compare to other chiropractors in your area, go to Rocket Chiro and request a free website and SEO review. I'll be happy to look at your stuff. No obligation. I'll send you a video. It'll be private. It'll be for you and for your practice. It'll be really helpful regardless of whether we work together or not. All right, so I'll tell you where this started. Granted, this has been going on for a long time, but I'll tell you where it started most recently, and that is I had seen a couple chiropractors. It might have been, I think it was Kevin Christie mentioned it, this like top 200 chiropractors or top 100 chiropractors. There's some sort of voting thing that's going on, and it had to do with influential chiropractors. I think Jeff Langmaid mentioned it as well. And so I saw this list, and I knew I wasn't on the list. Like, I didn't think I was on the list. I assumed that if I was on the list, somebody would have told me that I was on the list. But I went and looked anyway, because I've seen lists about like the top chiropractic podcasts that you should listen to. And I've been in Facebook groups and in groups where there's chiropractors, and they'll be like, what are the best chiropractic podcasts? And it's like, I'll see this stuff. And there's a part of me that's like, man, I never get mentioned in these like important people lists, popular podcast lists. I'm over 500 episodes deep in Rocket Chiro. I've helped a lot of chiropractors. Listen, I know I'm not a big deal. I know that. I understand that. I help a small niche of chiropractors. I have helped hundreds of chiropractors, maybe thousands if you take into consideration the podcast listeners and stuff like that. But relative to the amount of chiropractors that are in the world who could need help or want help or work with other people, I know I have a small deal that is here. But the prideful part of me that wants to be recognized and would like to be a big deal, and like I do work hard at what I do, is a little hurt by that. And I don't even like admitting that, because it's totally a pride thing. But there's a certain amount of like insignificance or whatever that kind of goes along with that. And I was thinking about my time in practice, and I thought to myself, practice was that way too. Like when I was in school, there was, without really any frame of reference, I just sort of thought that if you saw 100 patient visits a week, that point and beyond is what it meant to be successful. And then right before I got ready to graduate, I actually got connected with a few, it's Max Living now. It was Body by God then. It's like Ben Lerner's group. And I got connected with that group. That's all like those are chiro mills and they're like high volume. If you're not seeing 300 patient visits a week, you're not even a real chiropractor. And so I got around some of those chiropractors and the bar changed. My idea of success was I have to get to where I'm seeing 300 patient visits a week or more. And otherwise I'm not a real chiropractor. So I sort of had these bars, but I'll tell you, when I graduated, I was really sure that I was going to be great. Like, I was really sure that not only was I going to be one of the best chiropractors in my town, like I was going to be a legendary chiropractor. And I don't know where this came from. Like, nobody told me that. It wasn't like my teachers were telling me like, you're going to be great someday. Or I went to some seminar and they were just like, whoa, Jerry's got the stuff. It's not like that at all. It's probably my own stupidity and ignorance and pride and whatever. But I knew for sure, like, they're going to be asking me to go to seminars and people are going to be like, I'm going to have a table with my name on it someday, like Kale or whatever. I just had these thoughts in my brain that this is like, I was on this trajectory. And I think that this is easy for human beings in general. Like, nobody watches Star Wars and thinks to themselves, like, I'm the guy in the background that got randomly shot by a stormtrooper. Like, nobody thinks that. They think I'm Han Solo, I'm Luke Skywalker, like I'm Chewbacca. I mean, I'm somebody that's important. I'm somebody that's relevant. Like, that's how we see ourselves in stories. And I thought about this even from a basketball standpoint. Like, I grew up, I was born in 1980, and I grew up watching the Chicago Bulls, the greatest basketball team of all time, led by the greatest basketball player of all time. And anyone who says otherwise is just an idiot and has never actually watched Michael Jordan play. So I watched the Michael Jordan Bulls during the 90s, and I loved basketball. Like, I was a pretty good basketball player, and relatively speaking, no one was ever going to pay me to play basketball, but I could go in any Y in the area and I was probably going to be the best player. And so I watched Michael Jordan play, and even my friends, like, nobody watched the Chicago Bulls in the 90s and said to themselves, like, man, I'm going to be Luke Longley or BJ Armstrong or something like that. Like, nobody said that. And for those of you who didn't watch the Bulls in the 90s, you don't even know who those people are. Like, you don't know the random people like Ron Harper or whatever who were on the Bulls. People remember Scottie Pippen. They remember Michael Jordan. They remember Dennis Rodman. Like, those are the people that they remember. And when you see yourself playing basketball, you're pretending to be like Mike. You're wearing the number 23. You got I would have sold everything I owned to get a pair of Jordans back then. Yeah, it's like you're drinking the Gatorade. You're practicing the song. You're singing the "Be Like Mike." I want to be like Mike, like that. I mean, nobody says I want to be like BJ Armstrong and Luke Longley. They don't do that. So it's sort of natural, I think, to see yourself as the hero. But if we're going to be honest, most of us aren't the hero. We just aren't. Like, most people throughout human history are not legends. Like, how many people have lived and died before now that you have no idea who they are? And they might even have been a big deal within the context of their time frame, but one or two generation passes and it's just a fart in the wind. Most people are not going to be significant, even though we see ourselves in that way. And so the thing that I was starting to think about as far as your average chiropractor, and maybe I'm the only one that struggles with this, but it's like, okay, maybe I have to think about success and I have to think about significance in a different way so that I'm not beating myself up for not achieving something that I'm not going to achieve anyway. That 99.99%. Now, you may be the 0.00001. You may be Michael Jordan. You may be LeBron James. You may be Luke Skywalker. This may be your story and we may all be living in it. If that's the case, awesome. High five. Why are you listening to me? I'm an idiot. Like, listen to somebody else. Start your own podcast. You're great. But that's not most chiropractors. And so as I thought about my practice, and even my practice, like I practiced for 9 years. I was a chiropractor in Belleville, Illinois, and I feel like I was very good at what I did. With that said, I don't think there was ever a point where if you just went to the average person that was in my area and say, who's the go-to chiropractor in Belleville, I don't think my name would have been mentioned. I was a niche chiropractor that took care of a small number of people really, really well. And I did what I did really well. Oftentimes my patients were offcasts from the more popular chiropractors in town because I did something a little bit different. And maybe that little different thing that I did actually helped them a little better where they couldn't get help in a more kind of general setting. But I still wasn't ever a big deal. I just wasn't. And so I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, can I still be successful and be insignificant? Now, spoiler alert, I think the answer is yes. Otherwise, there's nobody that can be successful other than Michael Jordan and LeBron James. And that's not fair. People are successful, but we have to make sure that we're understanding what that actually means. So let's talk a little bit about success and significance. So I do think that success and significance, goodness gracious, that's a tongue tire. I wrote a blog about this, but I never actually said it out loud. So if I bumble over success and significance, I apologize. I do think that they're tied together, but I don't think it's the same thing. Now, some people do equate success with money. And I think in a business setting, that's really easy to do. I've never really considered money and success like a one-to-one thing, but I do think that in a business setting, it is a really good indicator of success. Now, there's always the how did you get that money and kind of whatnot. But there are some people that think that I have money, therefore I'm significant. And so it sort of gets messy. And I think the thing that's really important to understand about success is a moving target. You can't set success as legend or greatest of all time. It can't be like GOAT is success and anything short of GOAT is not success. It can't be that way. Because if you're a successful, we go back to the basketball world, if you're a successful high school basketball player, that means something different than being a successful college basketball player, being a successful professional basketball player. Like we see this all the time with like the NFL, which is you'll see really successful college football players who aren't successful in the pros. And sometimes you'll see players that aren't all that successful in college become very successful in the pros. And so everybody you have to really understand what does actually success mean within the parameters that I'm in, and also based on what I want. Now, we could all recognize that the greatest of all time, like that's a level of success. But I've said this with my coaching clients when I work with them, it's usually really easy for chiropractors to see their dream practice. Like, what does that look like? It's often really hard for them to see what does my practice look like next month that's going to take me in that direction. That's the thing that's harder to see. And I think that that's the thing that we have to figure out is we have to figure out if you have this big, grand, lofty idea and goal of what success looks like, how do we roll it back and say, what does success look like this month? What does success look like in the next 3 months or the next 6 months? And so those are things that you have to think about. Now, significance to me is very different. Some people do think that accomplishments make them significant, or they think that connections make them significant. It could be a last name. Like my last name is Kennedy. I'm not related to the important Kennedys. And so I always kind of jokingly say I'm related to the poor, bald Kennedys, not the rich ones with good hair. So I'm on a different strand of the Kennedy tree that is poor and bald. And so it's not like I would tell someone who my dad is and that makes me a big deal, but there are people like that. There are people that are married into being a big deal. There are people who are born into being a big deal. There are people who have accomplished certain things and that makes them a big deal. Certain people have a certain amount of money and they think that makes them a big deal. For me personally, and this is what I want to encourage you guys to do as far as changing your thought about what is significance. Significance to me has to do with irreplaceability. That's what significance is. It's not about money and it's not about your family and it's not about what you think about yourself. It's not even about things that you've achieved. How irreplaceable are you? Because I think those two things are connected. And the reason I came to this conclusion is about 10 years ago, my dad passed away, and my dad would never have been considered successful in the eyes of the world in any sort of measurable way. He was a very plain person in terms of how he presented himself. He was an engineer. I think he was very smart. I don't think he was very smart. My dad was a very smart guy. He was an engineer. He was always learning. He knew how to do a ton of stuff. Thankfully, he passed that down to my brother and I. We're actually surprisingly handy for rank amateurs. Like there's my wife always says, there's nothing I can't fix. And so my dad was sort of just an average guy who had some pretty neat skills, and he was very disciplined, and he was, pretty smart, but not Mensa material. And when my dad died, though, there was a hole that was left in my family that's never going to be filled, ever. And I remember sitting there at his funeral where it was probably 100 people. And I remember looking around, and I remember talking to different people and talking to some of my family and talking to my brother. And I remember thinking, my dad was so significant to this family. He was so significant to the people that knew him. Like one of my friends from high school that I actually do keep in contact with a couple friends from high school. And one of my friends from high school texted me the other day and mentioned my dad, that he was working on something with his car and he got stuck, and he was texting me and he was just like, man, I wish your dad was around because he would have known what to do. It's like, it's not even his dad. And it was 10 years ago that my dad passed away. My dad was an incredibly significant person, and he wasn't significant on the grand scale. He was significant on a small scale. And I think that that's the thing that we have to understand, and we really have to wrap our head around if I get stuck into a pattern where I'm like, hey, I'm not the most popular chiropractor in my town. I'm not the biggest chiropractor in Illinois. I'm not one of the chiropractors that somebody asked to go on a podcast all the time, or that somebody asked to go speak at an event or something like that. Like, I'm not getting invited to Parker to speak. And it's like, okay, if that's what significance means, then I'm not significant. But that's not really what significance is. Significance happens on a much smaller scale. And if you miss this, because if you think of it like a target, significance starts at the bullseye, and that bullseye is your parents, your kids, your brothers and your sisters, your best friends. Those are the people that are going to be sad when you're gone, way beyond what other people are. I think about Kobe Bryant. Like when Kobe Bryant died, I think he would be considered successful and significant by most people. But was he really significant from the standpoint of how many people now that it's been a few years since he passed away? Like there's this whole thing where it's like, his jersey and the flowers and the whatnot. And I'm not trying to minimize the mourning that people had with Kobe Bryant. But who are the people that are just still heartbroken that he's gone? It's that inner circle. It's his kids. It's his spouse. It's his, I don't know if his parents are still alive, but it's parents. It's siblings. It's his best friends. And if you miss this as a chiropractor, if you start trying to find your significance outside of the bullseye, if you start looking outside of it first, like I'm going to be significant because I'm a big deal in chiropractic, or I'm going to be significant because all my patients are going to think I'm a big deal. I'm going to be significant because I have a lot of followers on Instagram. I'm going to be significant. You are making your significance is just inside out. And I'm not saying that those things aren't cool and those things aren't important, but don't get it twisted. Your significance starts inside with the small group of the most important people who are closest to you. And so sort of this whole thing is really a dumb question, because unless you've royally screwed up your family, and if you have, try to fix it. You know what I mean? Like, it's important. But unless you've royally messed up your family, if you have kids that care about you, you have a spouse that cares about you, you have best friends that care about you, even if it's a small number of people, you're not insignificant. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, and like the idea of we're all made in God's image and everyone's significant. I mean, we could get kind of philosophical and vague, but even specifically, there are going to be people that miss you when you're gone. And you may be replaceable with your patients, and believe it or not, you probably are. That was one of the things that I felt a lot of guilt when I closed my practice, because I thought that I know I'm not the greatest chiropractor of all time, but as far as these people are concerned, I'm pretty darn awesome, and their life is going to be a wreck now that I'm not around. Like, I don't know. I have a pride problem, clearly. I obviously think more of myself than I should, because it didn't take long before like most of those people found another chiropractor. Now, a few of them bugged me, and I actually did see patients in my home for several years, that the people that just were really reluctant to go find somebody else. And so, but eventually they did. I was replaceable. But there are a few people in this world that I'm irreplaceable for. And that makes me significant, regardless of whether my podcast ever ends up on a top 10 podcast list. So it's sort of a silly question to say, can I be successful and be insignificant? Because you're not really insignificant. So can you be successful and think you're insignificant? Yeah, I guess, but you're kind of making it harder on yourself than you need to, because you're beating yourself up for something you shouldn't be beating yourself up for. You're not insignificant. And if you try to find your significance in things that are less important, that's kind of a rough way to go. Which also means that if you do become the greatest chiropractor of all time, I don't think you should find your significance in that. It's fleeting. So let's talk about chiropractors. Most chiropractors are not successful or significant on a large scale. It's usually a small scale. I think being successful is not, success is not being a legend. And I already said that, but if you have to be a legend to be successful, then most of us are in dire straits, because we're not going to be legends. Your significance for most chiropractors is found outside of your practice. I already mentioned that. And you can be wildly successful and still feel like a failure if you set your bar too high or your goal is unclear. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, I think it's a good idea for chiropractors when we talk about success, because I think the goal for success should be to be better, not necessarily to be the best. And I think being the best version of yourself is a great goal. That's something I tell you guys, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. That's something they say all the time about their players. Like, they want, the coaching staff's philosophy is, we want to help our players be the best version of themselves. I think that's a really good goal. I think it's a better goal than trying to make every player the best in their position across the league. And if they're not that, they have fallen short. When I tell you guys I was good at basketball, like I found a tremendous amount of joy and satisfaction with playing basketball, even though I was never going to get paid to play basketball. It's one of the few things in my life that I know for sure that I put a massive amount of work into, and I was pushing my talents to the absolute limit. I was being the best version of myself a lot of the time. And it was great. It was awesome. I was never the greatest, and I was never going to be the greatest. I have limitations. Turns out 6'4" when you're in the NBA, not very tall. And I'm not fast enough to be 6'4" in the NBA. I'm just fast enough to be 6'4" in college or high school. So make the goal to be better, not to be the greatest. More is not a goal. This is another point that I want to make. If your goal is to have more, you will always be unsatisfied. You will always be unhappy. And even if you are wildly successful, you will be miserable. So you can't say, like, what's your goal? More. How many patients do you see? 100. How do you want to see? More. 120. Okay. Now you're seeing 120. How many see 150? I'm seeing 150. How many you want to see? 200. 200. More. If you want more and that's your goal, you're never going to be happy, because you can't reach more, because there's always more. It's a good idea to sit down and say to yourself, like, what do I actually want as a goal, and be specific. It's really, really good to sit down and say, how much is enough? Some people, there's never enough. That's the answer. And those people are never going to be happy. And I'm not saying you can't ever get to the point where you have more than enough. I think that's a great place to be. That's where I try to be. But what I've learned in my life, going through different times and different phases, and now at 45 years old, I look back at my life and I realized that what I thought I needed, like in terms of enough, is not actually what I need. So how I would have answered this question at 25 is not how I answer this question at 45. And your like what's enough may go up, it may go down, it may stay the same. But I do think it's good for you to know, because if you don't ever answer that question, no amount of money is going to make you happy. No amount of money is going to ever settle that like burning thing inside of you that's just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And when you are constantly unaware of how much is enough, you tend to sacrifice those people that you are supposed to be significant to on the altar of ambition. That's a shame. Don't sacrifice significance for success. And that sounds weird for people who think success is significance, but they aren't the same thing. You are not going to get to the end of your life and wish you had an extra $100,000 in the bank. You're going to get to the end of your life and wish that your family and friends are there mourning, or they're happy to talk to you one last time, or they're missing you when you're gone. That you meant something. My biggest fear in life, and maybe this is kind of revealing to me as far as like this whole conversation. If somebody were to ask me for years, if somebody asked me like, what is your biggest fear in life? My biggest fear in life is being insignificant. My biggest fear in life is getting to the end of it all and none of it mattered. And I realize now with my kids, my kids and my spouse, and like, that's where I'm going to matter. If I never podcast again, you guys will listen to a different podcast. I'm irreplaceable with my kids. I am absolutely replaceable when it comes to chiropractic podcasts and chiropractic websites and local SEO, even though I think I do a bang up job. I'm replaceable. People will find somebody else to do it. So don't sacrifice where you are significant because you're trying to be successful and you haven't defined even what enough is. It's important. Riches are in the niches. You'll hear people say that. I forget I think that's a Pat Flynn quote, but if you're not a big deal, it's really important that you're clear on who you are, who you help, who you don't help. Don't try to be everybody's chiropractor. Don't try to be everyone's solution. Like most chiropractors who aren't a big deal, the ones who are wildly successful are usually really clear on who they are. One of the exercises I have people go through, one of the sections in my Next Step program is called Know Your Purpose. And the purpose of Know Your Purpose is to help people understand, who are you? What problems do you solve? Who are your people? And you have to answer those questions. Like the section does not tell you who the answers to those questions. It just poses questions and gives you a thought exercise so that you have clarity on who you are. Because if you're not the greatest of all time, you're not the best, you're not clearly heads and shoulders better than everybody else, and you're just the most amazing God's gift to chiropractors and people and human beings and whatever. If that's not you, which is most people, you need to start becoming very clear. Who are you? What value do you have to offer? What is your superpower? I mentioned like Dennis Rodman. Like Dennis Rodman's a really, really, really unique basketball player because he didn't score a lot of points, but his superpower was rebounding and pestering people. But he was an incredible rebounder. He had some games that are obnoxious number of rebounds. He was great at it. He's the best ever at it. He knew who he was. And you could actually find greatness and find success out of that, becoming very, very good at something very, very specific. I do think that the niches are, the riches are in the niches. And if you're not going to be an all-time GOAT, greatest chiropractor of all time, it's important that you understand who you are and that you get clear on that so that you can communicate that well to your community so that when your people find you, they know they found the right place. So can you be insignificant and successful? Yes, but I would argue that you're probably not insignificant. Chiropractors who feel insignificant are often feeling that way because they're looking for significance in the wrong place. One thing I want to challenge you to do, sit down and define success. What does big picture success look like for you? And then what does small picture success look like? What does success look like over the next month or 2 or 3 that takes you in the direction of the big success that you want to have? So that's important to do. Do that for yourself. You'll be glad that you did, kind of going into the rest of the year. Last thing is this little thought that I wrote down: be irreplaceable to the people who are most irreplaceable to you. So prioritize the people that are most important. And even the success that you have, do it for them. Do it because of the people that are significant to you. And when you get to a point where that success is interfering with those people, then you know that, you got to keep it back in balance. You got to rein it in a little bit. So those are some thoughts about success and significance. I hope this is helpful. I hope it's more of a thought exercise and more of just a sharing of some thoughts with you guys that I have been thinking about. And if you like the podcast, please share it with other chiropractors. Like I said, this is not a popular podcast, so lots of chiropractors don't listen, and I would be happy if they did. If you like the podcast and you want to go the extra mile, you can leave a review in Apple. That would be great. If you want to leave a review on Google, the link is on rocketchiro.com. You can find our Google link there. I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm going to wrap this up. If you want me to look at your website and SEO, request that on rocketchiro.com. If you want me to help you in any capacity or you want to work together, reach out to me through the website. I will talk to you guys on the next episode. See ya.